Today, many people around the world follow the religion of Islam. They believe in one God, called Allah. The story of Islam begins with the Prophet Muhammad in a place called Arabia. But before Muhammad, the people of Arabia had different beliefs. They worshipped many gods and goddesses. This essay will look at those old beliefs. We want to understand if there is a connection between the old gods and the God of Islam. This is a question that interests many people, both Christian and Muslim. It is important to look at history to find answers. We will explore the history of religion in the land where Islam started. This means we will look at the time before the Prophet Muhammad. We will learn about the gods that people in Mecca worship. One important god was named Hubal. He was considered the main god in the Kaaba, a holy building in Mecca. We will examine who Hubal was and how people prayed to him. Looking at these old practices can help us understand the world at that time. It gives us a picture of the culture and faith of the people before Islam became the main religion. This journey into the past will also take us to the pages of the Bible. The Bible talks about a god named Baal. We will see what the Bible says about Baal and why this figure was seen as a problem for the followers of the Hebrew God. Then, we will look at the New Testament, where Jesus talks about a figure with a similar name, Beelzebul. Understanding these biblical stories is a key part of our investigation. It helps us see how certain names and ideas were viewed in ancient times, long before the start of Islam. Finally, we will connect these different pieces of history. We will look at what scholars and historical records say about the relationship between Hubal, Baal, and the term Allah as it was used before Islam. The goal is to present the information clearly, so that everyone can understand the arguments. This is not about telling people what to believe. It is about sharing historical information and letting readers think about what it means for the history of religion. This topic is sensitive, so we will approach it with care and respect for all beliefs. In the Old Testament of the Bible, we read many stories about the people of Israel and their relationship with God. A name that appears often in these stories is Baal. Baal was not the god of the Israelites. He was a god worshipped by other people who lived in the lands nearby, like the Canaanites. The name Baal means Lord or Master. For the people who worshipped him, Baal was a very powerful god. They believed he controlled the rain and the storms. Because rain was so important for growing crops, people thought Baal was in charge of giving them food and making their lands fertile. The Bible presents Baal as a rival to the God of Israel. The prophets of Israel, like Elijah, often spoke out against the worship of Baal. There's a famous story in the book of Kings where Elijah challenges the prophets of Baal on Mount Carmel. He wanted to show the people that the God of Israel was the one true God, not Baal. The prophets of Baal prayed to their God all day, but nothing happened. Then, Elijah prayed to his God, and fire came down from the sky. This story shows the strong conflict between the followers of the God of Israel and the worshippers of Baal. The worship of Baal involved many rituals that the Bible describes as wrong. People would build high places and altars to honor him. Sometimes, the worship of Baal was connected with practices that the Israelite prophets found very disturbing. Because of this, the name Baal became associated with false worship and going against the one true God. In the eyes of the biblical writers, praying to Baal was a serious sin. It was seen as turning away from the real God who had saved the people of Israel and made a covenant with them. For this reason, the figure of Baal in the Bible is always shown in a negative light. He is the symbol of a false god who leads people astray. The struggle against Baal worship is a major theme in the Old Testament. It represents the larger struggle for the people of Israel to remain faithful to their God and not follow the religious practices of their neighbors. Understanding who Baal was in the Bible is the first step in seeing how this name connects to other stories and figures in the history of religion in the Middle East. When we move from the Old Testament to the New Testament, the name Baal appears in a different form. In the Gospels, Jesus' enemies accuse him of using the power of a dark figure to perform miracles. They do not use the name Baal, but a very similar one, Beelzebul. In the Gospel of Matthew, some people see Jesus heal a man who cannot see or speak. They are amazed, but the religious leaders say, "It is only by Beelzebul, the prince of demons, that this fellow drives out demons." They were trying to say that Jesus' power came from an evil source. Jesus responds to this accusation with a powerful argument. He says that a kingdom divided against itself cannot stand. He asks, if Satan drives out Satan, he is divided against himself. How then can his kingdom stand? In this response, Jesus directly connects the name Beelzebul with Satan, the ultimate figure of evil. For Jesus and the people listening to him, Beelzebul was not just a foreign god from the Old Testament stories. He was the ruler of the demons, another name for the devil himself. This shows that the name Baal had evolved into something even more sinister. The name Beelzebul itself has an interesting history. Some scholars believe it is a changed version of Beelzebub, which means Lord of the Flies. Beelzebub was the name of a god worshipped in the Philistine city of Ekron, mentioned in the Old Testament book of 2 Kings. Other scholars think the original name was Beelzebul, meaning Baal the prince. The change to Lord of the Flies may have been a way for the Israelites to make fun of this foreign god. Either way, by the time of Jesus, the name had become firmly linked to the world of demons and evil. This connection made by Jesus is very important. It takes the figure of Baal, the old rival god of the Israelites, and gives him a new identity as Satan, the great enemy of God. This means that in the Christian tradition, any worship directed toward a figure named Baal or Beelzebul would be seen as worship of the devil. This understanding from the New Testament is a crucial piece of the puzzle as we look at the religious world of pre-Islamic Arabia. It sets the stage for questions about other gods with similar names or roles in the region. Long before Islam, the city of Mecca was the most important religious center in Arabia. At the heart of the city stood a cube-shaped building called the Kaaba. The Kaaba was not empty. Inside it and around it were hundreds of idols, representing the many gods and goddesses worshipped by the different Arab tribes. Among all these idols, one stood out as the most important. His name was Hubal. Historical sources, including early Islamic writings, tell us that Hubal was the chief god of the Quraysh, the powerful tribe that controlled Mecca. Hubal was represented by a large statue placed inside the Kaaba. It was said to be made of red carnelian and shaped like a human. This statue was the main focus of worship for the people of Mecca. They believed Hubal was a powerful god who could predict the future. People would come to the idol of Hubal to make important decisions. They would use special divining arrows and cast them before the statue. The outcome of the arrows was believed to be a message from Hubal, telling them what to do. This shows that Hubal had a central role in the daily lives of the people. The Quraysh Tribe, which was the Prophet Muhammad's own tribe, held Hubal in very high regard. He was their protector and the god they turned to in times of need, especially in matters of war. When they went into battle, they would call upon his name for victory. Hubal was seen as the master of the Kaaba and the Lord of Mecca. The presence of his idol at the very center of Arabian worship shows his supreme status among the many gods of the pagan Arabs. He was, in effect, the king of the gods in their pantheon. The worship of Hubal was a key part of the religious system that Islam would later replace. When the Prophet Muhammad conquered Mecca, he ordered all the idols in and around the Kaaba to be destroyed, including the great statue of Hubal. This act marked the end of the old religion and the beginning of the new era of Islam, where only one God, Allah, would be worshipped. However, the memory of Hubal and his importance in pre-Islamic Mecca remains in the historical records, prompting questions about his identity and his connection to other gods of the ancient world. Many scholars who study the history of the ancient Middle East have noticed similarities between Hubal of Mecca and Baal of the ancient Near East. They suggest that Hubal might not have been a native Arabian god. Some historical accounts say that the idol of Hubal was brought to Mecca from another land. The famous Muslim historian Ibn al-Kalbi wrote that a man named Amr ibn Luhai brought the idol from the land of Moab in Syria. This region is exactly where the worship of Baal was very common for many centuries. The name Hubal itself might be connected to Baal. Some scholars believe that the name Hubal is simply another form of the name Baal. In ancient Semitic languages, words could change as they moved from one region to another. It is possible that Hubal was the Arabian way of saying Ha-Baal, which means the Baal. If Hubal was imported from a land where Baal was worshipped, it makes sense that he would be seen as the same deity. Both were powerful sky gods, associated with power and authority, acting as the chief god in their respective pantheons. The way Hubal was worshipped also shows connections to Baal. Both were considered oracle gods, meaning people came to them to ask about the future. The use of divining arrows before the idol of Hubal is a practice similar to other forms of divination, used in the worship of Baal and other gods in Syria and Mesopotamia. Furthermore, like Baal, Hubal was a god of great power and was called upon before battles. This role as a divine warrior and protector of the city is a classic characteristic of Baal in the ancient texts from places like Ugarit in Syria. This evidence has led some researchers to conclude that Hubal was, for all practical purposes, the Arabian version of Baal. Author Khairat al-Saleh, in her book Fabled Cities, Princes and Jinn from Arab Myths and Legends, directly connects Hubal with the Semitic god Baal. If the chief god of Mecca before Islam was indeed another form of Baal, this raises significant questions. Given the strong condemnation of Baal in the Bible and his identification with Satan by Jesus, this connection to Hubal becomes a very important point for understanding the religious background of Islam. A fascinating story from Islamic history gives us a clue about how the people of Mecca saw their gods. The story is about Abd al-Muttalib, who was the grandfather of the Prophet Muhammad. As told by the famous Islamic historian Ibn Kathir, Abd al-Muttalib was having trouble finding the ancient well of Zamzam. He made a vow. He promised God that if he was granted 10 sons and they all lived to be adults, he would sacrifice one of them at the Kaaba. The word he used for God in this vow was Allah. Years later, Abd al-Muttalib had 10 sons. It was time for him to fulfill his promise. But how would he choose which son to sacrifice? To make the decision, he took his sons to the Kaaba. He went to the idol of Hubal, the chief god, inside the holy building. He used the divining arrows, which were the traditional way to ask Hubal for guidance. He cast the arrows before the statue of Hubal to determine which of his sons was to be the sacrifice. The story shows him standing near Hubal, but the text says he was praying to Allah. This detail is extremely important. Abd al-Muttalib made his vow to Allah, but he went to the idol of Hubal to carry it out. He stood in front of the statue of Hubal, while praying to Allah. This suggests that for him, and likely for other people in Mecca at the time, there was a very close connection between Hubal and Allah. It seems that when they prayed to their supreme God, whom they called Allah, they directed their prayers toward the idol of Hubal. Hubal was the physical representation, the focal point, for their worship of the high God, Allah. The story continues with the arrows choosing Abd al-Muttalib's favorite son, Abdullah, who would later become the father of the Prophet Muhammad. To save his son, Abd al-Muttalib cast the arrows again and again, offering more and more camels, until the arrows finally chose the camels, instead of Abdullah. The entire ritual to determine the will of the divine was performed in front of Hubal. This powerful story, passed down through Islamic tradition, shows that in the mind of the Prophet's own grandfather, the worship of Allah and the reverence for the idol Hubal were part of the same religious act. The word Allah was not new when the Prophet Muhammad began his preaching. Historical and archaeological evidence shows that the term Allah was used by pagan Arabs long before the rise of Islam. The word itself simply means the God in Arabic. It is a title, like the Lord or the Almighty. For the pagan Arabs in Mecca, Allah was the name they used for the supreme God, the highest God in their pantheon. He was seen as the creator of the heavens and the earth, but he was a distant God. People believed he had other, lesser gods and goddesses who worked for him. The Quraysh Tribe, the rulers of Mecca, also used the name Allah. Even the Prophet Muhammad's father was named Abdullah, which means servant of Allah or worshipper of Allah. This shows that the concept of Allah existed in Muhammad's family before he was born. However, the worship of this pre-Islamic Allah was not monotheistic. The Arabs believed in Allah as the high God, but they also worshipped many other deities alongside him. They thought these lesser gods could act as intermediaries, carrying their prayers to the distant, powerful Allah. This is where the connection to Hubal becomes clearer. Hubal was the chief idol in the Kaaba, the most revered physical object of worship. Since the pagan Arabs used the title Allah for their supreme god, and Hubal was the chief of the gods housed in their main temple, it is argued that Hubal was the main focus of their worship of Allah. When they said Allah, they were referring to the great God who was represented by the idol of Hubal. Hubal was in a practical sense their Allah. He was the Lord of the Kaaba, the one they turned to for major decisions. This understanding helps to explain the story of Muhammad's grandfather. He prayed to Allah but did so in front of the idol of Hubal, because, in his religious view, Hubal was the image and representative of the high god. The religion of the Quraysh was a system where Allah was the supreme being, but his worship was channeled through idols, with Hubal being the most important. This is the religious context into which the Prophet Muhammad was born. Islam would later purify this concept, teaching that Allah is one and has no partners, and that no idols should be used to worship him. The pre-Islamic Arabs did not only worship male gods like Hubal, they also worshipped several powerful goddesses. Three of the most famous goddesses were named Al-Lat, Al-Uzza, and Manat. These three were highly respected across Arabia, and they had shrines dedicated to them. What is most striking is that these three goddesses were often referred to as the daughters of Allah. This shows once again that the pre-Islamic concept of Allah was very different from the one in Islam today. This Allah had a family. Al-Lat was a mother goddess, whose name may be the feminine form of Allah. Al-Uzza, whose name means the mighty one, was a goddess of power and was especially popular among the Quraysh tribe in Mecca. Some sources say she was a cruel goddess who required blood sacrifices. Manat was the goddess of fate and destiny, and her shrine was located on the road between Mecca and Medina. The pagan Arabs believed that these goddesses were daughters of the high God, Allah, and that they could intercede with Allah on behalf of the people. The Quran itself mentions these three goddesses. In a chapter called Surah An-Najm, the pagan Meccans are asked, "Have you then considered Al-Lat and Al-Uzza and another, the third, Manat?" The verse challenges their belief in these female deities. The existence of these daughters of Allah in the pre-Islamic belief system is a clear sign of polytheism. It shows a divine family structure with a supreme father God and his daughters, who held specific powers and were worshipped alongside him. This is completely different from the strict monotheism taught by Islam. The worship of these goddesses, alongside Allah and his chief representative Hubal, formed the core of the religion in Mecca before the Prophet Muhammad. The people did not see a contradiction in believing in a supreme God, Allah, while also praying to his daughters and other lesser gods. This system, where a high god reigns over a pantheon of other deities, is typical of many ancient pagan religions. The claim that Allah had daughters was one of the key pagan beliefs that Islam came to abolish, insisting that Allah has no children, no partners, and no equal. We have traveled back in time to look at the religious beliefs in Arabia before Islam. We saw that the people of Mecca worshipped many gods, with Hubal as the chief deity in the Kaaba. We also saw that they used the name Allah for their supreme god. The story of Muhammad's grandfather suggests that when people prayed to Allah, they often did so in front of the idol of Hubal. This has led some scholars to argue that Hubal was, in practice, the pagan Allah. This view presents a picture of continuity between the old religion and the new one. We also explored the connections between Hubal and the ancient god Baal. Scholars point out that the idol of Hubal was brought from Syria, a land where Baal was worshipped. The names may be related, and the roles of the two gods as powerful rulers were very similar. This link is significant because, in the Bible, Baal is presented as a false god, and in the New Testament, Jesus identifies a related figure, Beelzebul, with Satan. If Hubal is Baal, and Hubal was the pre-Islamic Allah, then this argument suggests that the object of worship in Mecca was, in fact, the biblical enemy of God. This line of reasoning presents a challenging perspective on the origins of Islam. It suggests that Islam, rather than being a complete break from the paganism of the past, was a continuation of it, just in a new monotheistic form. According to this argument, the name Allah was retained, but the worship was purified of the other gods and goddesses, like the daughters of Allah. The central object of worship, the Allah who was once represented by Hubal, remained. This view sees Islam not as a restoration of the pure faith of Abraham, but as a reformed version of Arabian paganism. For both Christians and Muslims, this is a very serious claim. It challenges the traditional understanding that Islam is part of the same Abrahamic family of religions as Judaism and Christianity. It puts forward an alternative history, one where the roots of Islam lie in the worship of ancient Semitic deities condemned in the Bible. Understanding this argument is not about accepting it without question, but about being aware of the different ways people interpret history. It forces us to look closely at the sources and decide for ourselves what they mean for our understanding of God, history and faith.